Hi, and welcome to Artalab, a podcast dedicated to conversations on visual culture with me, Kamaini. Today, we have with us webcomic artist and graphic novelist Appupen, creator of the internet's dubious superhero, Rashtraman. On today's episode, the second in our two-part series on the webcomic as political form, we discuss how visual satire can show us the workings of power, the history of cartooning as political critique in post-independence India, and why the MCU is a technocratic dream. Appupen is a comics creator, visual artist, and musician who tells stories from the mythical dimension called Halahala. His work on the original mythology of Halahala since 2005 has produced 4 graphic novels and 2 self-published comic books. Moonward, published by Blaft, Legends of Halahala and Aspirus from HarperCollins, and The Snake and the Lotus from Context Amazon Westland. Rashtraman, and Garden of the Snake are his 2 self-published works. Appupen launched his online comic series with the popular superhero satire Rashtraman and the politically charged Dystopian Times in 2015. He is the founder-editor of Brainded India, an arts collective with an agenda. Welcome to the show, Appupen, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Kavyani. Thank you for welcoming me. It's nice to be here.
Before we continue, I'd like to let our listeners know how to access the material accompanying our conversation. To view the images and other material being referenced and discussed in the episode, click on the link in the show notes to access the guide. You can also find the link to the guide for each episode in our Instagram captions and tweets. So the first time I saw your work was actually not online. It was at a protest at Jantar Mantar, the classic venue. Somebody had printed out a pamphlet featuring Rashtraman and they were distributing it among the protesters. For our listeners, I'll just very briefly elaborate. Rashtraman is a character, as I mentioned, from a satirical webcomic series by Appupen called Rashtraman. And it's set in a dystopian world that is also reminiscent of contemporary India called Rashtriya. George, you've put out 3 parts of this series. There was one in 2016, which was Guardian of Rashtriya, and then in 2018, you put out Chronicles of Kaurashtra, both on your website, braindead.in. And then, of course, you came out with a self-published book called Rashtrayan. Why and how did you conceive of this character?
I've been into comics for a while. From 2005, I've been trying to make comics that make sense. And I got published in 2009 with Moonward, where I introduced this world called Halahala, which is like a parallel world. And where we can relate to a few things, but the reality is can be different also. It has the freedom to take any sort of proportion that the story demands. So I thought it's a nice place to set all my stories. And with my work, hopefully, if I stick with it and I live longer or something, I can develop this world. I thought that could be a nice way to dedicate work to one thing. So Halahala has many aspects to it. We went through a very heavy corporate takeover and a god man and things like that in the beginning of Halahala. And now different parts of Halahala started developing a lot more. There's the ancient time where evolution was had taken a different course. There's a lots of stories set over there. And then there's the inner, deeper Halahala, which is sort of like in a mind space or a dream or something. And then there are these cities that are popping up. The point is there is no one definite map to the fantasy world. It's a fantasy world and it keeps changing. Maybe time is different. Maybe there are different dimensions in there. But I don't want a map and a mountain which says the dragon lives behind the mountain. That's not the kind of fantasy world it is. We want to address many things. We want to talk about things that occupy our mind and are maybe disturbing us and not getting us comfortable in some place. So then this idea of power was playing in my head a lot. Then because we were coming at it from the corporate angle, corporate power taking over and changing the world to suit its own goals. And from there, it became the power that influences people and how you can, if you have power, how do you show it off? Things like that became the interest. And I'd never been a fan of superheroes. And because it's very fake, right? And it's like believing in a particular god or a superhero, a superstar, a film superstar who's like a superstar on screen, yes, for his stories, and this superhero who has these, the muscles and the look, and he can never do bad. But still there's all this like injustice in the world. So what are all these superheroes getting together and doing in the Avengers Tower? And like this is sitting there and like everything's getting screwed around.
My theory is that when I see MCU movies, is that those people, those superheroes, can solve all the problems of the world except for capitalism.
Yeah.
It's so like apparent. Capitalist imperialist fantasies drive that vision.
So it's very clear, no, where the problem lies, because they have come up with the super who can solve everything else. But
Yeah.
then after that they have to sit in that tower and like shut up and like comment about each other's hair and beard and things like that.
Somebody told me, I once asked someone, I was pitching this to someone, and they said that I should headline an essay if I were to write one on this, the consultants. And that's so true.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The Avengers as consultants.
Yes.
It's a managerial class fantasy.
And I think like slowly they have to go into that, because already they're doing ads and stuff like that. So it can be used in whichever way that there it stops, right? Like it cannot cross that border. So I wanted to do a satire, just like I do the satire on the corporate world or ads. We used to spoof a lot of ads. The influences come from Ad Magazine and Adbusters and stuff like that, where we really want to spoof on things, and that's it's also a way of like paying tribute to a movement in a way. But that taking it apart like that made a lot of sense. The satire made a lot of sense to me even earlier as a kid. So a satire on power and the superhero idea. And this dressing up of the superhero and how you treat him, and our movies, our Indian movies are very close to it, because we have this kind of extreme bhakti towards the hero, right? Like the hero singing a song. Who are all those sidekicks like dancing behind him, and he's climbing over them and all that. When he jumps, they all catch him, and they don't seem to have an identity of their own, right? They go with they are the chorus. So Ambedkar has also said that we are very prone to this idea of bhakti, and apparently he'd warned us that like we shouldn't give too much power into one man's hands, and then we'll start worshipping him, because that's what we're used to doing. Initial intent was to make a superhero politician, basically, who has the corporate and the state power together in his hands. In Rashtraman's case, he came up with that. He's very proud of the fact that he's very extreme about his beliefs, and he wants to impose it on. He knows better than you what is like best for you. So he's very proud about it, and that's how it carries through. Like, and sometimes my satire also falls flat because of that. People don't see that. They take it seriously, and then we realize that it's been shared on much popular right-wing pages where they.
Yeah, I was like, Rashtraman is basically a Sanghi's wet dream, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Like, this is absolutely the kind of fantasy, macabre fantasy that they entertain.
Yeah, and
so, but that's the thing about satire, though, right? Like, as you said, it's a fine line.
If you're joking about doing atrocities to people, and if you still find it funny, then chances are you think like that.
Sociopath. No, that's true. And also, like, I think like what you said about this kind of critique of idolatry, right? That is so rampant in our culture, particularly. Of course, we know that this figure of the superhero is worshipped in many cultures around the world, many media cultures around the world. But definitely in India, we know this from even our cinematic narratives. But I also thought like Rashtraman is very droll in some parts, right? And some of it is quite on the nose. Sometimes it works maybe a little bit against it, but sometimes it works very well. For instance, like I really like the use of the rupee sign as the symbol of this dubious superhero, right? Because then you actually like just that one symbol, one grapheme is sort of indicating the links between this right-wing majoritarian villain hero, character, and like capital, neoliberalism, this kind of monetary, financial, order as well. So I thought those things were really interesting. And then there's also like these thinly veiled allusions to actual politicians and their operations, right? Like the fact that there's this Aadha microchip to surveil citizens, right? And then there's a Bal Rashtraman version, and there's Vigil Auntie who's out there to control young Rashtrian women. So I find like you're really trying to kind of play with the real and the fantastical, because at this point people also recognize that we know this is not a dystopian uh, nightmare, this is happening, right? So how do you like modulate the distance? Is that something that you also have to think about?
Right now, I think of it as complete fantasy, but I have definitely drawn from what is happening around. You don't have to take like actually these stereotypes exist in most countries. If you inspect, like analyze their political team or whatever, you will find that they all know now that they have to use media. So I have Propagandu to like Propagandi now. He used to be Propagandu in
Mm.
season 1. Then Rashtraman understood the importance of media, how Propagandu used it against him. And then he sort of got Propagandu onto his side. And that is how like real power operates, right? Then yes, Vigilante and all these people. There was a definition of fascism I was reading where it said like corporate power plus state power equals fascism.
Yeah.
It's part of a quote part of some essay from Chomsky, and I read this as somebody's quote. So I thought, okay, that's a good way. And Rashtriya, R,
Yeah.
Rupee, R, then Republic also R.
Yeah,
So
it's a lot. It's a lot of very telling alliteration.
yeah. So and I hate the rupee sign. Yeah, like it's not a very well designed thing, I must say. Like
Blasphemy.
so
I'm pretty sure both of us are
oh
going to
shit.
jail.
I thought I'll just do a better design for it, and like,
Yeah, yeah,
I like the Rashtraman sign for that.
yeah,
The thickness of the R curve also. It's.
right. It's very suggestive. But yeah, also, I mean, there's a great essay by the economist Prabhat Patnaik. I think it came out last year, where he actually draws the links between fascism and the free market. And it's fascinating because you instinctively know the two are co constitutive. And in this country, and in most countries in the world, people are just really not being able to make the connection. This they sort of will talk about cultural illiberalism
Yeah,
at best, but still want to preserve globalization, finance capital, neoliberal dominance. And that is really like that
yeah.
like makes no sense, because the two go hand in hand. So you have to decimate both if you want to be rid of this current state of affairs. You can't just magically get rid of fascism unless you do the same with corporate oligarchies.
Yeah, because it's quite. I mean, like quite surprising how closely they hold each other. Because if you look at the farmer protests also, like somebody's made a promise somewhere, and we gotta, like nothing can break that promise. Like
Yeah.
I'm in some way, like my corporate side, like is very impressed with this, this kind of loyalty. Like like
Yeah.
wow, like yeah, we should teach the whole nation to be like this, and then absolutely no,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, and I find it quite, I mean, even in the Kaurashtra comic, I thought, there's this face off between Rashtraman and his, I think, opponent, who's a minotaur like creature, right? Cowboy.
he's cowboy,
Yeah, it's a
yeah,
play on the
he's a
Gaurakshak.
prince.
Yeah, it's a play on the Gaurakshak kind of idea. But I mean, the iconography, of their face off, I thought was quite reminiscent, going back to Marvel, of the, of Civil War and like Captain America. You are sort of drawing on that, no?
Yes, I called it Civil War also, and then I was going with that. I'm not more interested in the Marvel scene than that, but to use that Civil War for this was very tempting. Like because
Yeah.
everybody, the whole world is talking about that. If you make something saying Civil War, then they're going to buy it. Then they're going to read it. Then
I also want to kind of pull back a bit from Rashtraman and talk a bit about your the art that you've been making for many years now, since 2005. Your website says, and your earlier work has included books like Moonward, Legends of Halahala, which you've talked about, and the Snake and the Lotus. So all of these books are set in a separate dimension, right? Which you've talked about, Halahala. And that's the name of the poison that came out during the Amrit Manthan, the churning of the ocean, right, in Hindu mythology. So I wanted to ask you, like, there's, in all of these works, I mean, even leaving aside Rashtraman, there's a sense of heroes and villains and the scale at which things are playing out. What is it about myths and their subversion that's attracted you in your practice?
I don't think I've managed that scale in any of them actually. In Snake and the Lotus, I was trying for a grander
Yeah.
like setting for the whole thing, even though it's complete doom and complete it's a broken world. I wanted to show it in that kind of a grand setting, beauty out of like the ruins.
Yeah.
The others, frankly, I don't think I managed the kind of thing. I'm a big fan of large stories. Like the our mythology stories are very interesting for me, and I think they're really great achievements. I don't believe it's been done by a single person or anything. It's been collected, and it's a work of a time, rather. So the fantasies of that time reflect on what people's preoccupations were and what all we needed. Like I see a lot of religious text also in that sense, like a story. And there's meaning for everybody in it, like whichever text you take, right? I thought I should make like a tribute to these things, and the proper way to do a tribute would be to like make a mythology of now, not like retell these things again and again and again. Man, please, Mahabharata for the West, Mahabharata for the East, Mahabharata for the middle. Like, oh man, Bhima's perspective, like, Hanuman's perspective, the chariot's perspective. Like, oh my god. Yeah, okay, I'm done with my rant on that.
Yeah, and tell us how you really feel about it. No, yes, I do understand. But no, but the thing is, okay, so yeah, but it's also my question then is, so there's this kind of, let's talk about your use of the mythic idiom in the Halahala books. It's that tendency is less present in Rashman because it's a more straightforward riff on the US superhero canon. Though one might argue that that genre has similar influences. When you think about the epic, as an approach or a mode versus the realist with a small r mode, many scholars have shown how it's tied up with the material and philosophical circumstances of historical modernity. In realist works, the world is depicted in its ordinariness and banality, which is a break from the epic style of narrative, which is articulated through conventional stylized types. The fact that you chose to take an epic stylized approach to the contemporary really emphasized, I felt like it really emphasized its allegorical aspects. You eschewed a naturalistic rendition or even an interpretation of an existing narrative, as you so eloquently bemoaned that type of work. You took the form of the epic and you applied it to the contemporary context. So, do you want to unpack that a bit?
Maybe we can tell it more clearly in some time.
Sure.
Right now, I'm not
It's a
trying for
work in
anything, but
progress.
what you're saying is quite like something I'd like to create. But I think that also requires a lot more work to be there to
Yes.
really like do justice to the world and all that.
Yeah.
See, to we want to definitely blur the lines between these genres that we are stuck to. I want to bring in politics and romance and horror and everything into this mix. I want to mix these things, but there are these realities that hold true. Like like if you take an ancient myth, what you call an ancient myth, a lot of the fantasy in that is the time. So they rode chariots and they attacked with spears or bow and arrow. All that becomes fantasy for us in this time. So I try to bring the fantasy in, but like use more current things and current fears and realities, like finishing off the resources. At that time they weren't worried about finishing off resources. And now we have only limited amount of resources, and there is death, there is extinction, there is we're destroying species and things like that. And then why? Because of the power.
Yeah.
So the instrumentations, I want you to relate to it directly, and some point, like see it in your own life also, only then that circle is completed. So yeah, try to like make that world like that. And now I'm going into the inner world actually. Like there's a lot of stuff happening in the mind
Like a
itself,
psychological narrative.
yeah, people are trying to catch you in your mind, it's
Mm.
not outside, it's how you think that matters.
So, like when I was looking at the work in your books, in Moonward, for instance, seems like there's a lot of painstaking pencil shading involved, and in the Snake and the Lotus, I thought that the brushwork seems apparent. So, I do want to ask, what are the tools and technologies you use, to make your work, and why those apparati? And secondly, I wanted to ask, like, when you opt for something like grayscale in the case of Moonward, or a blue white scheme in the case of Snake and Lotus, why do you make those decisions? I mean, what is the thinking behind that?
Some of it is aesthetic, and some of it is just because I don't have the talent to do otherwise. So, Moonward Time, I don't want to play much with colors because colors is just another world altogether. I'm not that equipped to deal with colors. I thought was. I didn't think I was well equipped to like deal with the art also. Hence the frantic shading with the pencil, and I'm trying to make up details to sort of distract you also in a way from my poor figure drawing, I think. So it's all this to see, because primary thing for me, I'm not trained as an artist, but I needed to convey a few things, and for me the main thing is that I need to tell some stories. Telling the story is more important, so therefore the style changing also. It's not like I've like mastered a particular style. I've sat on it for like years. I try out the style for a bit, and when I feel that I can run with what is needed for the story, I go with it. I want to tell stories, many stories in different styles, hopefully. And if you like you mentioned, like Moonward is enough. I mean, it's very good in gray for me because it goes into that grayness. The wasteland is gray. There's not much hope in it in the concept itself. So even the name and everything, I felt it went very much with the gray thing. So I was very happy to leave out colors, and my publishers were extremely happy that I left out colors because then it becomes much more cheaper to print also. But I didn't want Halahala to look like a grey world in general. Because I realized after Moonward that I am thinking of a world, but this is all I have showcased outside, and it happens to be grey. So everybody's thinking of this gloomy, dark world. So I wanted to make something much more colorful and vibrant and funny. So Legends of Halahala came like that, where it was just like love stories that happen in this Halahala place, and it has its own color to it. It has its own flavor to it. So a lot of color in that. Snake and the Lotus was also a tribute to the woodcut artists that I used to follow a lot, Lind Ward and all,
Inward.
people in the 1920s and
Yeah.
stuff, who I think were the first guys to make long stories in images without text.
Yeah.
And they used to have these full page illustrations. The full page is composed as a scene in the story. I was really taken up with that for a while. So I wanted to do a style that could be done in woodcut. It's my version of that woodcut. It's my adaptation of the woodcut style. But that's why there's so much black and white and the brush, and it's heavy fills, high contrast. But it suited the world inside the Lotus City, and also the light in that world is different. There is no sun, so it's a kind of a glow or haze that you feel, very artificial kind of light that you feel in the place.
Mhm.
So this worked for that. Also, I think it was just an exercise for me to do if I can do like 300 pages in that style, because it was a little intimidating in the beginning, and I just wanted to go through it to see if I can do that that lot. It seemed uphill, and then it felt nice when you finished it. It's that kind of work.
Yeah, yeah. It's so interesting that you talk about also how to evoke things like luminosity, in two dimensions in a way. And I mean, of course, it's an old problem to solve in art history. It's very old, but it's still interesting to think about how different. I'm always fascinated by how different artists choose to evoke light in different ways using the materials that they have, especially on flat surface. But you mentioned Lynn Ward, and I kind of actually want to go back to his work as well, because there's very little text in your books, I noticed. And like Lynn Ward's woodcut based panels were wordless. And in fact, he took his inspiration from Franz Maisril, who wrote a book called The Sun, which is actually a kind of which cites the Icarus myth, right? And since your work
Yeah.
also deals with myth and as we've discussed, I thought it was interesting that you chose to adopt this text as style of graphic narrative. I'm also thinking of Peter Cooper's work. He wrote a book called The System, which is of course much, it's not aesthetically like yours at all, but I just thought it was interesting to bring all of these different works in conversation with yours. So tell us
Absolutely.
about that.
I was trying to. I think it was one of Cooper's books. Sticks and Stones was there, and I'd seen some books like that where I thought the communication was a lot more powerful. And I was coming from an advertising background, where we used to spend a lot of money translating everything in different languages when things have to go across the country itself for to be put out in different parts of the country, and that becomes a big thing for comics also. How you translate and get it into a local language or something. That's what actually pulled me towards the silent stories. I thought like people will just understand the images, and get to read it like we could do it in our when we used to live in caves and stuff. We used to draw on the walls and so I thought I could tap into that very basic kind of mood for some of the stories, especially like what you said, Masaril and stuff. You can see clearly from his work that he is the first guy to like do this kind of thing. So he, along with the Sun, he has a story called The Idea.
Mhm.
The Sun, The Idea, and one more book is there here. Story Without Words. One of his stories is called Story Without Words.
Right.
So he was the first guy to do it, so he could like call it all these things, like
Huh.
how can you how can how can you call your story without words if like everybody today you can't do that, right? I like the impact of the words and the thought that it can reach anybody without impact of the images, I mean, and it can reach anywhere without words, right? So words also have a habit of like sort of interfering with the work, it'll give you certain whatever your idea of that word is or whatever you associate with that word could come into your mind before what is intended by the author. When I listen to music, I try to listen to music without words when I concentrate. Words come in, and each word has a lot of loaded meaning, and then they're singing about something, and then the whole thing becomes about that one thing. Otherwise, the music allows me to think free. I go everywhere in my head, but that word calls me immediately to a particular spot. So just like music without words, I thought the visual journey of the comic without words would maybe in some themes, of course you can't tell all stories like that. You cannot express some things, like it'll be easier to just put the word down, or some new things that you want to introduce have to be used in words. But for certain kind of narrative use, I especially like this mythology or like an allegory kind of thing. Wordless stuff is working because you need to have an idea in your head, like okay, it could go this way from here, because you already are sort of you're getting that story, you're anticipating the next move already,
Yeah.
and then it's a good way to use it without words. That works.
Yeah.
Rashtraman is again a spoof on the genre, so I want to
Yeah.
spoof on the look also. Okay, so there's a lot about how comics are printed.
Huh.
So earlier comics, if you see, you always remember the earlier comics in where the colors are bleeding into one another, like there'll be some overlap of print or something, and there's this red bleeding into yellow
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of thing. That kind of thing always comes. So I wanted to get that strong single color feel mostly, so there's very
Hmm.
little shading. That's why you said it's a graphic design approach kind of thing.
Hmm.
And also like comic layouts. Superhero layouts are very different from other graphic novel layouts or other graphic novel storytelling, because
Right.
you want to like crash every page, you want to smash it in, you want to like do that action and give it more power than there is.
Hmm.
So the visual language there is very different, sometimes almost comical in that sense. So I want to exaggerate on that also. So the Rashtraman language comes from there.
Right. But I also felt like but see, Rashtraman is a lot wordier, I thought, a lot more verbose.
Yeah,
And I
yeah, yeah.
understand that has to do with the template, right? Because you're sending up the superhero
And
genre.
also the premise is not very clear. Most people still think that he's not like, I couldn't possibly spend so much time drawing a character who's a villain. He has to be the hero, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people do go with that, and I think Rashtraman's appeal also, like, but I need to say something in words for those who are reading.
Yeah.
Like that's where the satire and the jokes can come in. So I need it. I would not use it in silent, because it'll be very misleading. I will lose the power of Rashtraman if it was silent and I leave it to interpretation. This is one case where you don't want to leave it to interpretation. You want to clearly say like what you mean. Otherwise, you're lost.
Yeah, it's also the nature of Rashtraman, right? Like as you said, that fine line between satire and a literal
Yeah, yeah,
depiction, as though you're valorizing it. So I think
yeah,
that of course is a bit risky, particularly in the kind of media context that we live in India.
yeah.
But also, like, one need not be explicit about what one is saying, but the work speaks for itself, right? I mean, the choices you make as an artist in terms of form, design, style, like as you have made. I mean, even with Rashtraman, the sending up of the superhero, that is already political, right? And or like, even like when we talk about your textless books, I mean, all of the things that you just said, they're already making, it's a commentary, right? Whether it's Lindward or Maestri, everybody is using the work itself to critique or hold a mirror up to reflect what's happening. So you can't really ever delink the two, even if your work is not obviously political, right? These things exist within a kind of history, right?
Yeah. It's like in the last 4 5 years, everyone's awakened to this political idea.
Yeah.
And now to do anything is suddenly it's political. Your views are political. Your opinions are too political. Things like that. But what I want to say is that like, this is just comic art. Like, I told you that time, like, cartooning has gone on for a long time. Storytelling has gone on for a long time. If you see any of them, right from like biblical times, it's always an allegory or a message to like society. That's pretty much all like people are doing now. There's nothing very radical about it or anything. But the background has changed so much that a basic commentary has become this most political like statement. Are you crazy? Like, you must be like off your
Rocker.
rocket to like say that, like that. So that is disturbing. And when you do just a fantasy superhero story with a joke, people wonder if it's safe to say things like that and all. That is how our background has changed, the way things are being seen, and how people think that your mind should be controlled. That's what got me into this power trip thing
Hmm.
with Rashtraman. Around 2015, I made some and I kept it. I wanted to make a whole series, but then I started putting it out. I thought, okay, it's time to
Yeah.
put it out. Otherwise, the reality is going to overtake it, and I won't be seen as fantasy anymore.
Yeah, I mean, so what spurred you to switch from books to webcomics? And what is it about that particular form that you find appealing as an artist? So, how do you think about the infrastructure of the internet in terms of how it's affected the form of the graphic narrative?
Mm, it's a tough scene in both cases. I wouldn't like prefer one over the other. I would rather burn both. So books are being published, and it's a whole game of like distributors and publicity and going for lit fest and like belonging in that circle or whatever. But whatever, even if you do all this, I have a few boxes to check. But even if you do all this with people who've done it, the market is too small. The Indian market is too small for comics and graphic novels. So therefore, the industry is not pushing it or putting its money behind it. They are only interested in publishing some to say that, yeah, we own these titles. Maybe you can make a movie of it if you give us a lot of money. But it's not, frankly, like, none of it is worth it. None of it is good enough. I think Indian comics have to grow a lot. I think we have to like mature into one scene. So then books are published and it's sitting on shelves at like 400 rupees, 500 rupees, 600 rupees, like that. And frankly, even I wouldn't pay that much money to buy my book. So, and it's
An
not selling a
honest
lot
man.
either. No, so here's the dilemma. Like, books are being printed, and all you get is that recognition of being published or something. Okay, I don't know for what reason, but still it means something for a lot of people. They want to get published, but there's no money unless you're like selling like some Hindu mythology story or something like that. Basically, you need really good volumes to like make money in that. So nobody is living on it, or
Like Amar Chitrakatha types.
no, like that like Chronicles of Shiva, or
Oh,
something
those,
like
yeah. Okay. Yeah,
that.
fair.
Amar Chitrakatha also sells a lot, and
Yeah.
I'm actually quite a fan of like Amar Chitrakatha. I learned most of my mythology from Amar Chitrakatha. Then I went and like read up like the real
The
stories
real
and
stories.
tried to
Like,
like find
wait,
out what they were about.
what? Yeah.
Yeah, again the real mythology stories, which has been written and overwritten by so many people, so that's okay.
Yeah. Many Ramayans, as A.K. Ramanujan wrote.
We just need to get an idea of the story. We don't need to take it so seriously. As long as we don't take it that seriously, it's okay.
Yeah.
And I got the name Halahala also from an Amar Chitrakatha, actually. Like that
Interesting.
same story what you're talking about, like she was drinking the poison, and then it said like Halahala, and with an asterisk sign, like how Amar Chitrakatha usually does, and at the
Yeah.
bottom it says deadly poison. I was like, what? They they named a deadly poison Halahala.
Hala.
Halahala is just such a stupid name. Like it's so funny. Like it doesn't sound anything like a poison. How can they call it
You're taking
Halahala?
up the real
So,
issues here, George.
huh? Yeah, I was just then I said, okay, my world is dark and funny like this. So Halahala is a funny enough name for that place. That's how I got into that. But yeah, so now you have this online thing where we can put up stuff. People can read it for free, which is not a great idea, and all the stuff belongs to these platforms, right? So it's in a way it's nice. I like it because I see a lot more art. I see that there is some sort of like agenda to put art every, I don't know, a few days or week. For everybody's putting up stuff. It's great to see that there's so much stuff being created, and also that people are seeing what is happening today in the present. When we were like trying to catch up with art, I would get a comic which is like from 1978 in 1988, and so that is my idea of comics. Tintin and Asterix were there, and
Yeah.
I thought they were like very current. And then later I realized that, oh my god, they were done in like 1960s and all that. So today you're getting to see what is happening now, which is very important. So it's great for exposure, and it's great to keep you in that thing. You want to like keep practicing. You want to make sure that you do one sketch like every week or something. It's good for that. Beyond that, what happens? None of this content, as you see, like it doesn't belong to you. Like we set up a page as a platform for art and any sort of visual play, basically. So animation comes in, satire, like whatever topics we like also be curated. There's me, there's Natasha, there's Ria. We're three friends who run this thing, Brainded.
This is Brainded, yeah.
And yeah, so we started, and I never thought it will have more than 5,000 followers. But like Ria is a very good curator, and she's been like putting, I think, the right kind of things. And we've also, I'm very pessimistic about these things. Like I don't expect people to like catch on, but I think like. We got like some curiosity from the people, because what we were thinking is there's nothing like Mad or Adbusters in this place, and I thought it's high time we do it here, because like the world is changing everywhere together right now. So that's how Brainded started, and we got a following right now, and now it's up to us to like keep like challenging that narrative
But
with
also
something
your
new and all that.
Instagram presence, right? Appupen, which is
Yeah.
how I found you, for instance. Like I knew about your work, but that's how I knew that, like I discovered the person with the account. And I think that that's also, I guess, one of my questions. Like what I really mean to ask is that you're right about the distribution. You've talked about the distribution of this content through Braindead, and also its existence as a platform. I think what I'm also interested in is how the aesthetic decisions are dictated by the medium of the internet, in whether it's Instagram or whether it's Brainded, like how do you envision the form itself having been transformed by this new medium on which it exists? It's not a book anymore, right? So the page is not the unit in the classical sense.
Yeah. Actually, it was a debate for me. The work is getting printed and it's sitting on some store, but I need people to see it if I am trying to talk to people or I want my ideas to get through. So it was a sort of moment where you decided, okay, you're going to put up this kind of your work, which is not like longer story format. They are in smaller capsules for you to consume. If it is a continuing story, people don't follow, people don't like keep the interest and come back to it or anything. It's all very immediate. The transaction is very on the spot. So we made these titles, Dystopian Times and some of the Rashtraman shorter ones, to appeal to this crowd. Because if we want to talk to people, if we want people to listen, then it seemed like this is the way to get through. And then that becomes a front to collect a bunch of people who like the thought. And if you want to take it further, we have more stories. We have longer stories, which I have printed also. Like one of the Rashtraman books is printed. It did very well, doing very well.
Was it the
for
same
print stuff.
sort of? It was the same narrative, but in book form.
No, it's a totally different. It's not there online.
So
The
that's
book story.
interesting, right? Like the book form, it has different demands on the artistic decisions you make.
See, I'm not a fan of like simplifying everything and feeding people exactly what they want. So I put up a whole set of like 10 stories of 10 pages each of Rashtraman last 2 months. Actually, November, December. We did a whole new series of Rashtraman that was not made for Instagram or the online consumption. That was made.
This is a book form.
Yeah, that is made for print, but I put it up online. It's tough to read online. You have to like. It'll be better if you go to the website and read it. But I know that not many people went and read it there. But I don't know. I'm not ready to just cater the whole story to that format, because it means like you don't say a lot of things. You can only say one thing at a time, and that's not the kind of narrative I like. This is meant for the corporate world or advertising, where it's that communication. That's all there is. There is no different layer to that communication. I don't like that. So
like the panel only kind of communication style, you mean, like the one that Instagram facilitates, which is like swipe and
even the narrative, it means that I can only tell you one story. There cannot be like a hidden story. You cannot. There's no space for you to read between the words or anything. So I don't know. Sometimes that takes away a lot from the kind of comics and the kind of work that I want to do. So I didn't find much sense in printing it in this year of lockdown and everything. So I put up the stuff that I was going to print. I put it up online. People who are interested can read it, and I think I'm going to print the same thing, by the way. So it's almost like if you are interested, you can collect it online. But a lot more people buy it in print, because when they see it as a book, it feels like something they can pay for. Maybe they won't read it, but like it's a nice thing you keep on the shelf. Nice to keep on the shelf, like you're politically aware and all. Wow, like you read comics and graphic novels.
It's a signifier.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, it's a it could spark a conversation at some point.
Yeah. No, I just find it really interesting, because I'm also thinking about the restrictions that spatial format of Instagram or the web imposes on narratives like yours. And based on what I've seen of your work, I was really interested to see how you took that up as a challenge. Clearly, you're not a big fan, and yet you do have those. You do have narratives on your Instagram page. So I was really interested in seeing how you took up the challenge of confining yourself to the panel-based kind of storytelling mode, even though that's not necessarily what that's not your preference.
See, spatial stuff is always nice. As a designer, you can take that challenge, and sometimes you have to design an ad for like a 2 feet by 30 feet long banner or something. You still have to make it work. So that's okay. But on top of all that, the if I just look at Brainded as a brand, and I think of like the kind of following it has, we cannot take the following anywhere. The following is only on that platform. If the
Hmm.
platform closes or our page gets
Yes.
closed down, then that's all there is, right? So there's nothing really to stand on. I want to like get people more into the habit of reading comics elsewhere or looking for our stuff online, like on our website or something, but people are not doing it, and that is why we are here. That is precisely why we're here. I am not under any fantasy that I'm going to fight and like deflate Instagram's bubble. I will use it while I can, and then it'll change, because I started doing this with like, what is it called, MySpace. Before MySpace there was something, what was that called? Everybody was on it. Anyway,
Orkut.
MySpace, Orkut, yeah.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember this.
Before that I had a website, and I had to email people to come to my website, and that's how I got my publishing deal, because I had like just put up stuff online in 2006 2007, and publishers contacted me. I was very lucky that way. It was before all the social media stuff, but now we have to use what is selling rather, and try to sort of play with it there, divert it from there. I think that's where the trip is. We have to go where the people are, and then subvert that crowd into something, or inject some influence or some art into them, and see if they react, because most people won't react in any given crowd.
Yeah.
So you're only looking at a few people who might get triggered by this, and they'll turn, and then maybe it'll mean something for them in their lives. This is the best thing you can hope for on any kind of like art or NGO activity that you want to do now.
Yeah.
It's not going to affect many people. It's not going to change the world. And if it makes your life a little more sensible, good.
Yeah.
But
No,
we
I
have to
think
be
it's also,
realistic about it.
yeah, and I also think like, this is how media history has always been, right? I mean, we talk about proto-graphic narratives on caves, as you said, or on stelae, right? On walls, and on, in the form of hieroglyphs, or in the form of engravings in many parts of the
Yeah.
world. I mean, those were all pictorial represent narratives, right? And then you come to the printing press, is invented, and suddenly you have the page as a new form, and then now you have the internet, the screen, which is a new form. So I mean, these changes keep taking place, and these transformations are.
And the return of the image.
What do you mean by return of the image, though?
Now I can only take in one image worth of like information. Like if you see the 80s, the 70s ads, they were very copy heavy. Then 90s we
Okay.
cut down.
You mean
Now
versus
we
text,
just,
like
yeah,
text heavy versus image heavy, right?
yeah,
Sure.
like going back to caveman times, like
Full circle.
just the image has to do it, and therefore the thought has to be simplified to that level.
Yeah.
It is like a yes or a no. It's like this troll who comes underneath this issue. He doesn't know what the issue is, and he says, "Sir, like karna hai ki boycott? Just tell me." Like make it simple and just tell, and we'll do it.
Right. Right.
It's like Kamal ke upar button dabao.
Or if you're Jyotiraditya Scindia, then you get confused about which party you're supposed to be
Which
asking
party?
people to press the button of. But
I think he is the majority.
yeah, but like in the backdrop of petitions being filed against sanitary panels and stand-up comics like Munawar Faruqi being arrested, do you think that political art has taken on a greater significance? I mean, you were talking earlier about locating yourself, right? In the longer history of political cartooning, we know it's not new. You have something like K.S. Pillai's Shankar's Weekly, which ran from the 40s up till the emergency. You have R.K.
Yeah.
Lakshman of Times of India, E.P. Unni of the Hindu, Rajinder Puri of Hindustan Times and Statesman. So you have like a canon of people who've been working in this terrain. How do you see that legacy with relation to you and your contemporaries who are working in this arena? And against the backdrop of what's happening in terms of silencing dissent currently.
I don't think there's any justification for Munavar scene anyway. Like it's just okay. Like somebody thinks it should be done or something. Because at that time we cannot react. Also, no, we don't have any logic anymore. I think the problem is with information. Earlier, we didn't have so much information to play with, or the fear of this information. It's quite funny how it has come about, because it is always the propaganda that brings this forward. So this too much of information, like we have many dystopian stories and settings where, you know, people are contemplating the information scene, like, you know, what will it be like when there's too much information, we cannot like put it all together and we cannot process it, kind of thing. There's no way we can control it. So it's this attempt to like control, which I don't think
So
you
you're
can
saying, are you
control
saying
also.
that the landscape in which all of these other people were making work was markedly different, even though you're doing nothing different from what they were doing? Is that what you're saying? Like they didn't have trolls. I mean, not in the way that we have today.
Yeah. And also this the spread of information at this level, it can reach anybody on the phone now, so people are more scared of information now. If
They
you want
were.
to stay in control, if you want to stay in power, you know now that it's getting through to everybody. Earlier, you know, okay, it's coming in a newspaper. Newspapers were read by more people then, but if you see the reach of the newspaper, there'll always be like some lakhs of newspaper or something like that, and only people who are educated are reading the
Literate.
newspaper. So like you know, the spread of information right into people's hands, into phones, that is what has changed this whole thing. It was very different. I was telling you, like Uni was telling us a story where we used to have this exhibition called Flaneur in the city. Uni, me,
In
and
Bangalore.
Gokul Gopal Krishnan. We've done it in Bangalore and Kochi.
Okay.
The three of us, Uni, me, and Gokul Gopal Krishnan. It was Gokul's idea. It was a nice concept. We made traveling stories from different cities. So we were sitting in the evening and we're talking about the scene now. And Uni has to make a comic for tomorrow, he said. And now he just does it like last minute. You know, it's okay, like, you know, because earlier what he reads in the morning news that day is the final news till the next day. So they have the whole day to like work on the comic or anything. But today, like, things are changing, and by evening everybody knows better than him what the news is. So, you know, he has to get on top of that again to actually like put out something. And I think that time, because if you see online also, there are a lot of interesting political cartoon guys now, and like, you know, you'll see a lot of them are cracking jokes on the same thing that happened the previous day.
Mhm.
And sometimes I think it's a bit of a race to like see who cracked that joke first and all that. It's quite nice. But I also think that, you know, the minister who says that stupid thing that previous day, or that stupid statement that was made by some representative the previous day, is also orchestrated. You know, it holds media. It takes that attention into that thing, and everybody repeats that story by this minister of a certain party. So the party gets mentioned a lot. Minister gets mentioned a lot. Even the minister's name nobody would have known before he made this blunder, you know. And then after that, you start hearing his name a lot. It's a nice PR setup. It's a good campaign, you know. So I try to stay away from the daily comicking thing, and making cartoons about particular people or particular incidents, because I think if we wait a few days, we get a more zoomed out picture, and it might make sense. I try to think of the comic like you should be able to get the idea of it even a few years later, or even if you're sitting in some other place and you don't remember this particular yesterday's news. Otherwise, we are riding on the news too much, and sometimes that's not the best way to go about it, I thought.
Right. So in one sense, you feel like the topicality based graphic art, cartooning, for instance, is something that you are not that interested in because of the fact that it's tied to specific events or really particular moments. Whereas you believe the narratives you want to create, they should have a more of an enduring legacy in a sense, or they should be, relevant even years from now.
Yeah. Because otherwise there's a risk of like falling into somebody's narrative or the other person's narrative.
Yeah.
Here you're just putting it as an analogy of what's happening, and then everybody gets it as a story, right? If it's a story of violence, and you know, most human beings know like where their allegiance lies when you hear the story. That is why we have like such black and white movies and, and serials where you clearly know, like, okay, I'm with this guy, you know, that guy is the villain, bad guy. Like,
Yeah. Moving away even from the political, tonally, I was sort of reminded of certain contemporary parodic comics in India. Like, I don't know if you've seen Ood Bilao Manus.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I mean, this was many years ago that I came across their work, but
Yeah.
I just, it sort of reminded me a little bit of their tone and tenor.
No, there are some nice, like, so, see, we have to find our own voice, like, over here, you know. I like this kind of stuff because it speaks its own language. It's not trying to be like some superhero DC comic thing or
Yeah,
something. I'm sure you know Sumit Kumar's work also,
yeah.
Bakar Max.
Yeah, Bakar Max.
Very good. I like. We share a lot of Rohan Chakravarti green humor.
Oh, yes. I follow
Mostly
them.
mostly online stuff, but he's very like popular now. Sanitary, we used to like sanitary panels. We used to do a lot earlier. It was, and now there are actually, you mentioned Jamun Kapret also. We just shared their story like just yesterday or day before, and I
Yeah.
thought like you would mention. I like to see there are more and more voices coming, and more importantly, aesthetic and like more involving things coming. Like people are taking the story forward. That's really nice. We need a lot of people to come in and do it, even if it's just for a storytelling thing. You know, I'm not looking at it only as a political tool or anything.
Yeah.
It's just like people expressing. Like you can start expressing about anything now,
Yeah.
and like you will end up saying things like "Don't kill the world" and "Don't kill other people" and all that. You know, even that is
Well,
politicized now.
yeah, I mean, the
Yeah,
sense that,
that's
like, of course, everything is political. One could argue, and people have argued, that Amar Chitra Katha is pretty right wing, and it's definitely been co-opted much more aggressively by ideologues of the right wing today, right? So yeah, nothing is above a political agenda for sure. It's just a
yeah.
question of how implicit and explicit it is, right? And I'm not even saying the artist is always conscious of their political motivation when they're making it, of course, but your own values and your worldview will inform the work you make. So yeah.
Yeah, if you say like don't cut a tree, it becomes like, are you against development?
Absolutely, that's political too. You
You
are
know?
like a probably some kind of fat cat who wants to land grab and make money, right? If you think that somebody
Yeah.
making a comic about environmentalism is evil or bad.
No, some minister had actually said that I had made a Rashtraman comment on it, like where he said trees are against like a deterrent to development. They're standing in the way, kind of thing, you know.
I like the El Topo poster behind you. I mean, it's quite cool. Do you think you take any inspiration from Jodorowsky?
Yeah, I think so. I like Jodorowsky, Mobius. There's a lot of thinking, and Huxley. I think a lot of my thinking got freed by listening to some things these guys said. Maybe, I don't know, but these are just like downloaded from the net and printed on my own printer.
Right.
So
Why
I was
not?
just trying out the printer actually, and then by
It's
the time
as
I
good a
printed,
reason as any to print out Jodorowsky. It was really nice talking to you. And I'm so glad that we had this conversation. I think that it was really interesting to navigate all of this. Thank you so much for being on the show with us. It was great to have you and to talk about all of this with you.
thank you, Kavyani, and thanks for keeping that spirit up with your expressions. I was like wondering it's getting through, and it was nice. It was really nice to be here.
Thank you for tuning in to Artalap with Appupen as we discussed supervillains masquerading as superheroes. If you enjoyed the podcast, please like and share the episode over social media. For more information and updates, you can follow us on Instagram at art.alap and on Twitter at RTALAAP.